Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really sinking our teeth into a source that has, I think, fundamentally changed how a lot of us think about modern work.
Oh, for sure.
It's Cal Newport's brilliant book, Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. We've pulled apart the research, the anecdotes of the core arguments, so you can understand not just what deep work is, but why embracing it might be the single most important professional move you can make right now.
That's the critical setup, yeah. I mean, before we even get into the central thesis, we have to clearly define the terms we're working with.
Right.
At the heart of this whole philosophy are two opposing forces: deep work and shallow work.
Okay.
So deep work, that's defined as professional activities you do in a state of, complete distraction-free concentration. It's work that intentionally pushes your cognitive capabilities. It's where new value comes from.
This is the hard stuff.
It's the hard, rare, and honestly deeply fulfilling kind of effort.
And then there's the other stuff. The stuff that fills up our screens and our calendars. Shallow work.
Precisely. Shallow work is, well, it's everything that doesn't push you. It's non-cognitively demanding logistical-style tasks.
Like email.
So much email.
Reading and answering email, yeah.
Or perpetually monitoring Slack, updating status reports, attending meetings that probably should have been an email. The key is it's often done while you're distracted, and it creates very little new value.
If you're doing it, a high schooler or an intern could probably pick it up pretty quickly.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to really unpack the engine that drives this entire philosophy, and that's the deep work hypothesis. It's the ultimate statement on why this all matters so much.
And the timing of this hypothesis is what makes it so urgent for you, the listener. It states that the ability to perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare at exactly the same time it is becoming increasingly valuable in our economy.
Well,
And the implication of that is staggering. The few people who actually cultivate this skill and make it the core of their working lives, they are going to absolutely thrive.
So that's the setup. But why? Why is it becoming so valuable? Why is the market rewarding focus now more than ever?
Well, you have to look at the massive economic currents at play. We're talking about what some MIT economists, Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, they call it the Great Restructuring.
Okay.
Digital tech isn't just making old jobs better, it's fundamentally changing the labor market, splitting the professional world into these two very distinct paths. They call it a bimodal trajectory,
So some jobs are flourishing while others are just.
becoming rapidly automatable or easily outsourced, yeah.
And the sources identify three key groups that are thriving in this new landscape. And they give us some really great examples to make these, abstract categories feel a bit more concrete.
The first group is the high-skilled workers. These are the people who can work creatively with intelligent machines.
Not against them.
Exactly. Think of someone like Nate Silver, the data whiz and election forecaster. He doesn't compete with the algorithm. He uses his deep analytical focus to ask new questions of the data the machines give him, and he pulls out these valuable, non-obvious results. He augments the machine's intelligence.
Then you have the superstars. This is all about the rise of these winner-take-all markets.
Right. Technology has made the talent pool global. So consumers, whether they're looking for software or writing advice, they will just flock to the very best person available, no matter where they are.
That's where that principle of imperfect substitution comes in, right? I love this idea.
It's a beautiful way to put it. Hearing a bunch of mediocre singers doesn't add up to one outstanding performance. Quality isn't additive in these fields.
Right.
And when the market can instantly get the best, like David Heinemeier Hansson, the creator of the Ruby on Rails framework, they choose the best. So the rewards for being just slightly better than average become exponentially higher.
And the third group, the owners. These are the people with the capital to invest in these new technologies. The archetypal example cited is the founder John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins, looking at the Instagram sale.
And that Instagram example is so crucial for understanding this shift. When Instagram sold for $1 billion, it only had 13 people working there.
13 people. It's incredible.
So when the actual labor input you need to create massive value is that low, the rewards naturally flow disproportionately to the owners of the capital, the investors and founders.
And not to the knowledge workers who are just churning through shadow tasks somewhere else.
Exactly.
So if you're listening and you want to be a high-skilled worker or one of these superstars, what specific traits do you have to master?
Two core skills are identified as necessary to get into those thriving groups. First, the ability to quickly master hard things. And second, the ability to produce at an elite level in terms of both quality and speed.
And this is where deep work shifts from being just, a productivity hack to a fundamental requirement.
Yeah.
You cannot achieve those two abilities if you are constantly distracted.
You absolutely cannot. I mean, take skill mastery. It requires something called deliberate practice, which is intentionally focused effort to improve a specific skill. By its very nature, it demands concentration, isolating that one feedback loop. You can't have distraction whispering in your ear while you try to rewire your brain.
The sources even give us a scientific reason for this, bringing up the concept of myelination. Can you break that down for us?
Okay.
Because it sounds like textbook jargon, but it's actually the key to mastery.
It sounds complex, but it's incredibly practical. When you engage in deep, intense focus on a complex skill, say learning to code, you're firing specific neural circuits over and over again. This intense focus triggers myelination.
Yeah.
Think of myelin as layers of biological insulation, like laying down super fast fiber optic cable around those specific brain circuits. The more myelin you build, the faster, more efficient those circuits become. That's mastery, physically.
That analogy helps a ton. So if you're trying to learn something hard, like advanced SQL, but your Facebook notifications are popping up, you're not just wasting time. You're physically firing too many random circuits at once. You're actually hindering that myelination process.
Exactly. You're building slow, messy connections instead of those high-speed neural highways. And the same focused intensity applies to your output. The book gives us this powerful equation. High-quality work produced equals time spent, multiplied by intensity of focus.
So if your focus intensity is low because you keep switching tasks, you have to spend 5 or 10 times the amount of time to get the same high-quality result.
You got it, which is just not sustainable.
So we've established that depth is the gateway to economic success and skill mastery. That raises a huge question. If it's so valuable, why is deep work becoming increasingly rare? Why is our professional culture actively making it difficult? This is the great paradox.
It really is the cultural paradox of our time. I mean, look at the numbers. A 2012 McKinsey study found that the average knowledge worker spends over 60% of their work week just dealing with electronic communication and internet searching.
60%.
And nearly 30% of that time is dedicated to the black hole of email alone. That's 3 out of every 10 hours spent on logistical back and forth.
And we build environments that actively encourage this fragmentation. I always think of the open office concept.
The sources point to Facebook's headquarters, which has the world's largest open floor plan, as the ultimate embodiment of this. They talk about serendipitous collaboration over concentration.
Right, the random valuable chat.
But internal studies and experiments show that these designs overwhelmingly lead to massive distraction. You're sacrificing your most valuable resource, your focused attention, for the possibility of a random conversation.
And we let this happen because of the principle of least resistance. These cultural behaviors that are so bad for depth thrive because, honestly, they're just easier in the moment.
That's the key. It's so much easier for you to let your email inbox dictate your day, just reacting to whatever's newest, than it is to implement some complex, advanced planning system like David Allen's flowcharts. Most people will always choose the path of least intellectual friction.
I can relate to that. And think about the social friction. The sources mention that frustratingly common practice of someone forwarding an email with just thoughts.
That's a perfect example. From the sender's perspective, it's the easiest way to clear their plate. Takes 2 seconds. But it shifts all the cognitive load and complexity onto the recipient, who now has to use deep, focused energy to craft a proper response.
And that just drags down the whole organization because everyone is doing this shallow reactive work.
Exactly. And this lack of clear metrics for what deep work even looks like, that leads directly into the problem of busyness as a proxy for productivity.
Right. If you can't measure the value of writing a complex document, how do you measure success?
Most knowledge workers operate in what the sources call a bewildering psychic landscape. They don't have transparent metrics. A professor is judged by their publication record, their H-index. Richard Feynman could famously avoid committees because his physics output was undeniable.
But without that clear measurement, people just default to signaling their value through visible busyness. They prove their worth by responding instantly on Slack, keeping their calendar packed, even if the work is shallow.
It's digital busy work, and it's a devastating habit. And this brings us to the payoff, the neurological and psychological benefits of flipping the script and protecting your depth. The science here is just irrefutable.
The first, most immediate damage of task switching comes from the attention residue effect, studied by Sophie Leroy. I think this concept is the most terrifying for the average knowledge worker.
It is, because we all think we're good at multitasking. But the reality is, when you switch from task A to task B, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A cognitive residue of the first task stays stuck in your short-term memory, and it dampens your performance on the second task.
So if you quickly check your inbox and see 3 emails you haven't finished, that residue is especially thick when you go back to your spreadsheet.
You're essentially performing task B with half a brain, which makes that quick inbox check just as damaging as leaving it open all day, because every time you look, you create new unfinished business that leaves that residue behind.
Exactly. And beyond productivity, there's a profound neurological argument for deep work that relates to happiness. The science writer Winifred Gallagher experienced this during her cancer diagnosis. She realized our brains construct our worldview based on what we pay attention to.
So if you focus on your unpleasant circumstances, your mood darkens. But if you manage your attention towards something positive or complex, your world literally feels better.
Deep concentration acts like a mental hijack, then.
It totally does. It completely consumes your attention, preventing your mind from dwelling on all the small, petty anxieties that populate daily life. You improve your perceived quality of life without changing anything concrete about your circumstances.
That feeds directly into Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on the flow state, that sense of optimal human experience.
Flow is when you're fully immersed in something and time seems to just melt away. And Csikszentmihalyi proved that the best moments in our lives happen when the mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult.
Deep work is basically a guaranteed path to flow.
It really is, which is intrinsically rewarding. But if you want to access that flow, you have to train your mind to focus. And Clifford Nass's research offers a really sobering warning here.
What's that?
He found that constant attention switching, the hyper-connected lifestyle we've adopted, creates habits of mind that make it impossible to be laser-focused later, even when you try to turn everything off. You are literally rewiring your brain for shallow work if you don't fight this.
Wow. So you have to actively resist that compulsion for distraction.
You do.
Okay, so we've got the motivation, we know the damage of distraction. How do we actually structure our lives to prioritize depth? The sources are clear. You can't just schedule it ad hoc. You need a predetermined philosophy.
Right. Scheduling deep work haphazardly almost always fails because the demands of the shallow world just crash right through it. The book outlines 4 main approaches, depending on your lifestyle.
Let's start with the most extreme. The monastic philosophy.
This strategy involves basically eliminating or minimizing all your shallow obligations to maximize depth. Think of the computer scientist Donald Knuth, who famously uses a physical postal address for communication and avoids email entirely, or writer Neil Stephenson, who takes extreme measures to isolate himself.
But I have to ask, doesn't that require a level of seniority or fame that most people just don't have? Is that really accessible to a starting employee?
That's a great point. It certainly requires a level of autonomy many people lack. That's why the bimodal philosophy is often more practical. You alternate between long, isolated, deep work sessions, days or even weeks, and then fully open periods where you handle all your shallow stuff.
So concentrated isolation followed by concentrated communication.
Exactly. Wharton professor Adam Grant is the example here. He batches his teaching and service obligations into one semester and reserves the other semester entirely for deep research.
Then we have the one that seems the most flexible, the rhythmic philosophy.
This is probably the most accessible for a lot of listeners. You just turn deep work into a simple, regular habit with a set schedule. You create a rhythm. Brian Chappell, a successful author, he worked from 5:00 to 7:30 a.m. every weekday morning. Non-negotiable.
The don't break the chain method.
Precisely. It leverages the power of routine. It requires the least upheaval, but probably the most disciplined day to day.
And finally, the toughest one to master, the journalistic philosophy.
This is fitting deep work in wherever you can in a demanding schedule. It requires intense mental focus on demand. Think of Walter Isaacson, the biographer, fitting writing into these small, intense blocks of free time between interviews. It sounds appealing, but it's brutally hard. You need the mental muscle to switch modes instantly.
In whichever philosophy you choose, the key is ritual. The sources say you need to work like accountants, as David Brooks put it. You need strict idiosyncratic rituals.
Robert Caro, the famous biographer of LBJ, built these incredibly rigid routines around his work to minimize the friction of getting into that deep state. You need a space, a duration, and a set of non-negotiable rules for that time.
And to really make this stick, The sources advise adopting fixed schedule productivity. This kind of turns time management on its head.
It does. Instead of trying to fit more work into your schedule, you set a hard deadline for the workday, say 5:30 p.m., and you work backward from there. It forces a scarcity mindset.
So you have to ruthlessly cull the shallow stuff, because you know the 5:30 is a hard stop.
Exactly. Professor Radhika Nagpal famously set a 50-hour-week limit and cut down her travel dramatically just to protect her deep research time. It's about limiting your input to force quality output.
And the final piece of the structural puzzle is the shutdown ritual. This is essential for preventing work anxiety from bleeding into your personal time.
Oh, it's crucial for psychologically disconnecting. Before you finish your day, you have to review every single incomplete task and confirm a solid, documented plan for its completion. Make sure nothing is left hanging in limbo. And only once that's done, you say a set phrase like, "shutdown complete."
Why is that final planning step so important?
Because of something called the Zeigarnik effect. It's this psychological phenomenon where incomplete tasks just dominate your attention. They're like a browser tab open in the back of your mind, sucking up cognitive energy. By completing the plan for the unfinished task, not the task itself, you're telling your subconscious, "I've got this handled, you don't need to worry about it until tomorrow." It frees your mind to actually rest.
That's powerful, giving your brain permission to stop. Finally, we have to talk about our tools. The source material demands we change our relationship with technology by abandoning the any-benefit mindset.
That mindset is simple, and it's so common. If a tool like a social media app provides any possible benefit, we feel like we have to use it. And that just leads to an accumulation of shallow tools that destroy focus.
So instead, we need to adopt the craftsman approach to tools.
Right, and this approach is rigorous, it's ruthless. You only adopt a tool if its positive impacts on your core goals substantially outweigh its negative impacts on your attention and your time. You have to ask hard questions. Is this tool truly indispensable, or is it just convenient?
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The takeaway is that deep work is a skill. It's not some innate personality trait or a luxury. It's a highly leveraged skill that delivers outsized professional rewards.
Just look at the foundation of the tech industry. The success of a company like Microsoft was built on an act of deep work. Bill Gates coded intensely for 8 weeks straight, often falling asleep at his keyboard, to create the first version of BASIC for the Altair. Paul Allen called it a prodigious feat of concentration.
That's the pragmatic core of this whole philosophy.
A commitment to depth isn't some moral stand against technology. It's a pragmatic recognition that the ability to concentrate is the skill that separates those who create immense value from those who just manage logistics.
You fight distraction, not because distraction is evil, but because concentration is what lets you achieve mastery and thrive while everyone else is floundering in the digital shallows.
So we'll leave you with this final practical challenge. It's rooted in applying the law of the vital few, the 80-20 principle, to your network tools. Ask yourself, which 20% of my tools are responsible for 80% of my value creation?
The source material suggests that for most people, their social media use, Facebook, Twitter, whatever lightweight connection platform you're on, it does not support the top 20% of their most important personal or professional activities.
So the challenge is simple. Conduct a 30-day quitting experiment for those non-vital services. At the end of that month, ask yourself honestly, would the last 30 days have been notably better if I had used this service?
And if the answer is no, the craftsman approach demands you quit it permanently.
The ultimate freedom lies in rejecting that societal expectation of distracted hyperconnectedness. You really won't know how much time and energy you reclaim until you truly sample a life without them.